Today we're going to be talking about nonviolence versus violence. And we all know what nonviolence and violence is. So like nonviolence would be people like Martin Luther King Jr. who didn't believe in violence. He didn't believe in violence approaches versus somebody like Malcolm X who believed in violence and thought that that would make a big difference, but it really didn't. From the stimulus based packet, I read the letter from Birmingham jail, Why We Can't Wait, and from that I chose to quote, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all of us, all indirectly." And what basically this means is, even though something that could happen like Chicago or something, it still comes back to us, even though it didn't happen to you as an individual person. So with that, I have developed the question, why is nonviolent action more effective than violent action in an African American community with a high crime rate and low income than a violent approach for police? And the context of this question is that we hear about stuff like this every day or every few weeks or every few months, but we don't really know what actually led up to that. We only hear what what media gives us. We only hear either the good or the bad. We never hear what actually leads up, like how did it start? But we don't actually hear how it finishes either. We put our own inputs in, and we basically finish the question ourselves. And with that, I have researched the lens, political and historical, with perspectives like Martin Luther King, police, and other civil rights activists. All these people have made a big impact on us from the past until now. For example, Martin Luther King was obviously a civil rights activist who believed in nonviolence. He believed that if we came at a calmer approach, things would be different. And it did work. I chose police for this because although like back in the day it was like a lot more police brutality, it kind of still comes back to today because of morals and people's morals and beliefs. And other civil rights activists like Harriet Tubman or like I said before, like Malcolm X, even though he was very violent. Basically, what we're seeing is that history is basically repeating itself. Like back in the day, we've seen that how people blocked streets and all to make a point, and we see that today as well. Like just recently, there was a protest. I forget where, but we seen that they were throwing gas tears, and it kind of affected everybody. And so with that, like we always have two different sides to things, and we're always leaning to one side, but we never really talk about how these people affect each other together. So that's what we, as a society, need to focus on. And I said before, ethical is one of my research lenses because police use a phrase called "stop and frisk," where they can stop anybody at any time just because they look suspicious, and it's not just because of skin color or anything. That's what they believe. But on the other hand, African Americans believe that it is because of skin color. It's in fact because of stuff that happened back in the day. So they believe that this is actually happening, starting to reoccur again. And so as you can see in this picture, they say my skin color is not a crime, which is true. But sometimes it's just because you're in a bad neighborhood and it seems like you're doing something in the wrong, and you could probably be innocent. And sometimes that's not the case. So the most stop and frisk occurrence happens in places like New York, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and Chicago. These are the most violent places almost on earth with low-income communities, and that is a problem today because in those low-income communities, there's more chance for you to do stuff wrong. You don't have the tools and necessities that you need to survive. So you go into stuff like that, like drugs and violence actions and murders and stuff like that. So in this chart, you can see that this is the adolescent risk behaviors by family income. The blue is the low-income families, the green is the middle income, and the purple is the high income. And you can see that majority of this is the blue because they're low income and they don't have the necessities that we have today. So they have to resort to things like this just to make money to get by in life. So overall, my solution is that we need to amp up police training. Simple fact, if they're always accusing us of doing something wrong, we don't feel safe, and their job is to make us feel safe, and their job is to protect and serve. And some people don't feel like they're doing that, and others do feel like that. We need to have better judgment. We can't just go based off of something that we heard from the past. We have to think logically about it, and not stereotyping. Lastly, if we stereotype, we're not really giving anybody an open mind for anything. So we're just basically jumping to conclusions. So overall, we need to put love over hate, because if we put love over hate, it can make the world a better place. I know this is a hard topic, and the limitations of that are very high, because it's going to be hard to try to amp up police training, because we have to go through so many government laws. Non-stereotyping is hard because of what you believe in and what you grew up learning. And then, like, just violence in general, it just needs to stop. But we can't change that as a society. We can't change that as an individual. We have to come together to do that. And that's it.
Okay, couple questions for you. First one is, how did your research question evolve as you moved through the process? And did your research go in a different direction than you had planned?
It evolved because at first it was like really short, and then it got longer because I was trying to focus on another perspective other than African Americans. I wanted to do like LGBTQ or something like that, because they struggle with things like this too as well. And you know, the most research that came up was about African Americans. So I was like, okay, well, this is what's coming up. I should use what's given to me.
Okay, and then the second question is, how does your conclusion respond to any of the other research or sources that you examined?
So my conclusion resorts to others that I examined, because and like the other other sources that I used, they had the same kind of conclusion, and I was like, okay, well, across the board, we all had the same conclusion, but we're not doing anything to stop it, to like prevent other stuff from happening and make these conclusions, like these solutions, come true. So what I did was I kind of just put my kind of input on it, other than what they used, because there was all like scientific and stuff like that.